All right, so now that we know that finding the parents of a child can actually be a pretty tricky process in this game of life, we can use this weirdo structure to actually do some cryptography on these patterns. And this is basically the same game that we do over and over and over again in cryptography. That is, you give me some kind of cute, easy process in the forward direction that is an absolute pain to do in the reverse direction, and we can use that structure to actually go about building some systems. So this idea of easy in the forward direction, hard in the reverse direction, is actually referred to as a trapdoor function. And I always really appreciate things that have clever names, and trapdoor functions are one of them, in that trapdoors are really easy to fall into. You always have this example of somebody walking across the stage, they hit a trapdoor, they fall into it. That's pretty easy to do. You just fall, basically. It's very tricky to then claw your way out of a trapdoor. I've never officially fallen into a trapdoor, so I don't actually know how hard it is to claw your way out, but it does seem like a fairly tricky thing to do. So trapdoor functions are going to be those types of things that we seek in crypto land, in that easy to do one direction, really hard to do in the reverse direction. So in Conway's game of life, this idea of easy to do in the forward direction is going to be these future generations. So you start with an initial configuration, and then you run it through this next gen, next gen, next gen, next gen, as many times as you feel like. And then it's going to kick out some final configuration. So this 20,000th generation of whatever you have, that's going to be your last child. And that's what's revealed out into the world. That's easy to do. That's the falling through the trapdoor. The tricky thing then is going to be, how would you begin to claw your way back up? So you have that child. You would then have to ask, how would that go up a level? So find a parent of it, and then a parent of that parent. And you very quickly can see that that web's going to become absolutely chaotic and very, very hard to work in reverse. So once you have that type of structure, you can begin inserting it into whatever type of system you want to play with. So the system that I'm going to insert it into is going to be a key exchange algorithm, basically because we've not played with key exchange algorithms yet. We've seen a little bit of hashing algorithms, a few crypto systems. So now we're going to go into kind of the third thing of crypto land that we want to work with, which is going to be a key exchange algorithm. So the way that public key exchange algorithms work are pretty cute, and they all have the same general structure. You're going to have your two party members. So here I'm still going to bring in Fancy Bob and Fancy Alice. Alice has got her Western hat, and Bob's going to have his fancy top hat. And the goal is that these people have never met. They have no known shared information between them at all. But the hope is that at the end of this, that they're going to have some type of shared secret, or some type of shared password, or a shared key is usually how this is interpreted. That's why it's going to be called a key exchange. So we're going to swap some things around, and at the end of the day, they're both going to be in possession of some shared thing. Usually these key exchange algorithms are presented as kind of a weird paint mixing thing, and that's how they all look. And it's this nice little analogy that is silly, but it does stick in people's brains. So I'm just going to quickly go through this. If you've seen this paint mixing analogy before, it's a good chance to kind of dust off your paint mixing skills. I don't know if dust and paint mixing should go hand in hand, but whatever, I said dust off, so we're just going to go with it. So the idea here is that we're going to assume that Alice and Bob are in different cities. Let's say Alice is up in Boston and Bob is down in LA. And at the end of the day, they want to have a shared paint color. They've never met. They can't talk through some type of channel because they have no secret channel constructed. So every bit of communication is open and available to the public. So at the end of the day, they want to have some type of shared paint color. So they can't just say, hey, go buy brown, because that communication would be seen. So the way that this is going to work is that they're going to go to their local paint store. They can be on an open channel at this point in time, and they're going to say, okay, we're both going to buy the same yellow paint. So yellow paint 11794. Paint's got crazy numbering things, so they're going to buy the exact same yellow paint. That's going to become their base paint. While they're at that store, they're both going to secretly buy another paint. But they're not going to tell that other person what paint they bought. So Bob's going to buy this weird teal paint. Alice is going to buy this kind of weird reddish paint. And they're going to buy two kind of doses of that. One that they're going to mix in right away, and one that they're going to mix in a little bit later. So let's say we buy a quart of the yellow paint, and then a quart of this teal paint, and then another quart of that teal paint. So in total, they're going to buy 3 quarts of paint. I don't really know anything about paint, so that's a lot of paint. But all right, we're at the end of the day, we're gonna end up with 3 quarts of weird brown stuff. So Bob's going to mix in one version of his teal into the yellow, and Alice is going to mix in 1 quart of her reddish thing into that yellow. Scramble those paints up. So Bob's now going to have this weird kind of bluish paint. So it's teal plus yellow, which makes weird blue, let's say. And Alice is going to have the yellow plus the reddish, which is going to make that orangish paint. That then is going to be sent across whatever channel they're working with. So they're going to mail this paint to one another. I don't think you're legally allowed to mail paint because it is flammable, but let's assume that Alice and Bob have an ability to swap paint in some fashion. They could be in the same town and they could just like drop off paint at some bench, which also seems sketchy. They could just leave paint at a bench and the other person goes and picks up the other one. So in some scenario, they're going to swap paints. So Bob's then going to have Alice's weirdo orange paint, and Alice is going to have Bob's weirdo blue paint, and they're going to mix another bit in. So Bob can only mix in the teal. So initially Bob had the yellow mixed in the teal and sent that blue. Alice had yellow mixed in reddish, ends up with orange. So now Bob's got that orange. So now Bob's going to mix in his little teal paint one more time and end up with this weird brown. Alice is going to mix in her red one more time and end up with this brown as well. So at the end of the day, that is their shared secret. They never swapped brown paint. They swapped ingredients to make that brown paint. So at the end of the day, they both are in possession of 3 quarts of paint. 1/3 of it is yellow, 1/3 of it is that teal, and 1/3 of it is the red. The only thing that changed was the order that they were mixed. And as long as the order of mixing doesn't matter, we'll end up with this shared paint. So yellow plus teal plus red makes brown. Yellow plus red plus teal makes brown. So now they have a shared nice little secret. So that initial picture is then what the kind of classic Diffie-Hellman key exchange looks like. In that scenario, the way that mixing would be done would be through modular exponentiation. So you have a nice little generator, you're going to mix in some massive exponent and then mix in another massive exponent, and then you end up with this shared secret. You can also extend it up to the world of elliptic curves. There's going to be a different type of scrambling that's going to go on. So you take a point and scramble it and scramble it. Basically, as long as you have some type of trapdoorish function, you can build a key exchange out of it. And that's what we're going to do here, in kind of a silly little way to allow us to visually see what this key exchange looks like, rather than the paint version of it. So the way that this is going to go down is we're going to start with an initial configuration. So think about that as like our yellow paint. Then Alice and Bob are going to scramble these things up by running this next gen algorithm some number of times. Let's say Bob runs it NB times. Let's say he runs it 23,000 times, and Alice is going to run it NA times. So she runs it 8,743 times. So at the end of that, they're going to have some future generation. It's going to be a configuration. That configuration is then going to be passed. And then what they're going to do is they're going to take that result and run it the same number of times that they ran the first one. I already forgot what the numbers were, but let's say Bob mixed it up 10 times, Alice mixed it up 13 times. So then they swap them. So now Bob is in possession of something that's been mixed up 13 times, and he adds in his next 10. So now he's down to a 23 mixed time thing. And then Alice is also going to end up with that because she's going to take her 13 mixed one. She sent that off, but she received Bob's 10 mixed in one and then mixes in 13 more. And at the end of the day, we have this nice shared graph, which is then going to be our shared secret. So let's jump into what that looks like visually, because it's a little bit easier and I have numbers already coded in there, so I don't have to make up numbers and forget about them on the fly. So this is in Safari Land. Maybe, sweet. All right, so same stuff we had before, kind of all that initial bulk information up at the top. And then we're gonna have this construction for the Diffie-Hellman via this game of life. So I'm keeping things small because I don't want the thing to blow up on me. So I'm going to have my initial configuration be this thing. And then we're going to do our initial mixing. So this is, we went to the paint store. We all agreed upon using yellow paint. Everybody in the entire world knows that we bought yellow paint. Then we're going to do our secret mixing. So Alice is going to compute the 13th generation. Bob is going to compute the 37th generation. And then we're going to end up with these. So you can see after 13 clicks, we end up with that top one. After 37 clicks, we would end up with that bottom one. And then these things get swapped. Well, then Alice is going to be in possession of that bottom one, the one that's been mixed up 37 times. Well, then she's going to mix it up another 13 times to make a total of 50 mixings. Likewise, Bob is going to receive the top one, which has been mixed up 13 times. He's then going to mix that one up 37 more times, which is then going to create, again, 50 mixings, which is exactly what happens at the end. So their shared secret is then going to be this crazy, weird little configuration. I could always convert that back into a decimal number. If you think about this as this rows and columns of zeros and ones, and that becomes their neat little shared secret, which they could then feed into some other type of channel or whatever type of next system or next step that they would want to work with. So that's how key gen algorithms all work, is that at the end of the day, they're going to be in possession of some piece of shared information. They have very little control as to what it's going to kick out. They just know that at the end of the day, they are going to both be in possession of it. So in the paint analogy, they don't know right from the beginning what they're going to end up with, because Alice doesn't know that Bob's mixing in some type of weird blue. In the same way here, is that we don't know how many times Bob is going to mix it up. So at the end of the day, it's just going to be some version of this scrambled up chaos, and it's pretty cute. So I like this one a lot just because it's silly. It looks absolutely ridiculous. It's a fun way to remind people how these key gen algorithms or these key exchange algorithms are going to work, and that there's mix in here, swap, mix, share, and that's it. The idea that I alluded to before is pretty cute in that anytime you want to swap out a piece, you can easily swap out pieces. So here, the piece that I swapped out was to take that modular exponentiation structure of the classic key exchange algorithm and then replace it with this chaotic, weird next generation in Conway's game of life. It's not at all secure, but it is kind of a nice little visual to see, here's my initial mode, here are my past pieces, and here's my final shared secret. So it gives us kind of a nice visual of what's going on, but it is, I alluded to before, definitely not secure to play with in practice, but nice to remind you what all the pieces are that go into a key exchange algorithm. So enjoy, have fun.